Hello, students. Today I'll do Unit 4 of the essay The Essentials of Education by Richard Livingstone. By the end of Unit 3, Livingstone mentioned that if we wish to see man in full face, we have to study religion, literature, and history. In Unit 4, he begins by saying that of religion I will not speak. Admittedly, in its highest forms, it contains the purest and finest archetypes of human excellences. Though it can be taught, as it was to me at school, with almost no reference to these aspects of it. So he says that I need not speak much about religion because he admits that in its highest form, religion contains the purest and finest examples of human excellences, of the first rate human nature. And religion can be taught as it was taught to him in school. It can be taught with no reference to these aspects of it. Its surprising neglect in much of education shows how little we are concerned to hold up to our pupils the noblest examples of living. So he says that it is really surprising that religion has been neglected to a great extent as far as the curriculum in education is concerned. And why it is so that we cannot hold our religion up to the students. Religion which puts up the noblest examples of living, of human nature. Why is religion not taught to students in schools or colleges? Of the other two, history and literature, the former is perhaps the less illuminating. So he says that history and literature, if we compare these two subjects, then history is a bit less illuminating as compared to literature. It is not so personal as literature. History is not as personal as literature is. So, literature is more subjective. Mainly, it is the record of man as a social being. It means history. He is talking about history here. He says that mainly history is the record of man as a social being, making societies which grow even more complicated. How man forms society? History tells us about the formation of society. It is the record of the fortunes of these societies, their success and failures. So, how far these societies succeeded and in what areas they failed. History is the record of all these things. The storms which shattered them means the societies, and which they rode out, and of which the societies emerged as victorious. So, how the societies and the man who were responsible for forming these societies, how they faced the storms and how they came out of these storms. The wisdom and folly of man and the societies, the virtues and the vices, the good and the bad of the officers and the crews of many ships of the state. So, history is about all these things. But it becomes more personal in its biographical aspects. And there we may find light on human nature and its excellence. So, he says that uh, if we go through the biographical sketches or the biographies of great people, it is only there that we can find the extracts of human nature or focusing aspects of human nature and the excellence of human nature, the first rate of human nature. It is only in the biographical portraits of these people, of great people, that we can find what is first rate in human nature, what is excellent in human nature and human life. If we are to find it, it means if we want to find the excellence or the first rate of human nature, mere passive reading of a biography is not enough. So, we cannot be a passive reader of biographies. We must go to it with questions, taking some famous man and asking what he owes to his heredity, to his environment, and to the circumstances of his time, and to his education in the narrow sense of the word. So he says that if we want to know what is first rate and excellent in human nature and human life, and if we are going through the biographies of great personalities, then We cannot afford to be passive readers. We have to be very alert while going through the biography, and we have to have this sense of questioning within us when we are reading a biography. We must take up the biography of some famous man, and we must ask questions like what he owes to his society, or to his heredity, or to his environment, to his circumstances of his time, to his education. And here he's talking about about education in a narrow sense. Next, he says that to the last, I'm afraid it will be found that in most cases the debt is small. So, as far as the contribution of great personalities towards education is concerned, he is pretty sure and a bit afraid also that while going through the biographies, we'll find that these people did not owe much to education. Note what are the decisive moments in his life, what opportunities he seized or missed, his difficulties and how far he overcame or was baffled by them. So, what all do we need to notice when we are reading a biography? What we need to notice is the decisive moments of his life, where he took some really important decisions of his life, which opportunities he grabbed, he seized, and the opportunities which he missed. Then, what obstacles, difficulties, hurdles he faced in life, and how he overcame all his hurdles and confusions in life. About his successes, we need to read his mistakes and failures. We need to know not only about his successes but even about his mistakes and failures. What he did and what he failed to do. In which fields he was successful and where did he fail. His contribution to his age and its importance at the time. What were his contribution to his age and how are his contributions relevant even today? And afterwards means for the generations to come, for the ages to come. So how far his contributions are relevant and will be relevant in the coming time, we need to have this knowledge. We need to study these things while going through a person's biography. His qualities and defects, his good and bad, vice and virtues, whether he had the long sight to view problems, sub specie aeternitatis. So, he is trying to say that whether he was long sighted or whether he was short sighted, whether he was thinking about future ages, future time to come, or whether he was confined to only his contemporary era. So, subspecie aeternitatis means under the aspect of eternity. So, we need to know whether he was foresighted, long sighted, or whether he was in the light, he did everything in the light of all time and all existence, or only the short sight which suffices to deal with the immediate needs of the hour. So we need to know that whatever contributions he made towards humanity or his society, his country, his man, his fellow beings, whether these contributions are relevant for the long term or whether what he did was only relevant because he was short sighted. So these contributions were relevant only to his era in order to meet the immediate needs of the hour. Whether he is significant for all ages or merely for his own, whether that particular person is relevant, important, significant for all the ages or merely limited to his own era, his own age. Then, in order that greatness may not be confused with goodness, ask whether or not, in Plato's words, he arrayed his soul in the jewels proper to its nature, justice and temperance, and courage and truth. Temperance means self control. So he says that if we want to know whether this particular person, the biography of whom you are going through, whether he was a great person or he was a good person, if we want to bring out this difference between greatness and goodness, then we need to ask, in the words of Plato, that whether this person ordained his soul with the real jewels with the jewels which were true to his nature: justice, self control, his temperament, his courage, and truth, whether he was a fair person or not. If he was true to his nature, true to his own values, his ethics, then in true sense he was a great person, otherwise, he was merely a good person. If, however, we wish to see man, as I put it, full face, it is to literature that we must turn. So he says that if we want to know man in his complete form, in his complete existence, then we need to turn to literature. Rather than history, we need to turn to literature. There we hear him talking aloud to the world, but really talking to himself. For example, we know about soliloquies, putting on paper the feelings that come to him. In literature, we see how the writers speak out their mind, how the characters of a particular literary work, how they speak out the mind of not only the writer but of themselves too, how the characters are portrayed in various colors. Now, in literature, what is done? Thoughts are put on paper, the feelings are jotted down on paper. Whatever feelings and emotions come to the mind of the writer, they are simply jotted down on paper. So that in literature is recorded every thought, every vision, every fancy, fancy means imagination, every emotion that has ever passed through the human mind. Just because a person speaks out his true self, his true mind. So, in literature, every thought of the writer, every vision, his imagination, his emotion, his fancies, everything is recorded. What a record! So, he is praising, he's appreciating literature, that what a marvelous record it is. Is there any better way of learning what men are, so far as it can be learned from books and not from meeting human beings? So, if we are unable to meet human beings in practical life, in reality, then the best way to know what is first rate is to take up literature, is to read the works of literature. Only there we can seek what is first rate in human nature and human life without actually meeting human beings. And however good are opportunities of meeting them, a lifetime of human contacts could not give us as wide an experience of human nature as literature can give. So he says that, however, the fact remains that even if we get ample of opportunities to meet such people in real life, even then we cannot get that extensive experience of human nature by meeting those people in reality to the extent that we get from literature. Okay, so he is putting literature above the practical and real experiences which a person can go through while meeting such great people in reality. Of course, all literature does not give us a portrait of human excellence. It shows us human nature, but not necessarily or always human nature at its best. So he says that no doubt there are exceptions in literature too, because we cannot expect that all the time literature will paint human nature in its excellent and first rate form. It is not necessary that every time human nature is painted in its best form in literature. And just as in history, one must distinguish between greatness and goodness and not be dazzled by genius of a Napoleon or a Bismarck, a Hitler or a Lenin, into ignoring the evil which they did and which lives after them. So, in literature and art, one must avoid a similar mistake and not allow the genius of a writer to blind us to what is unworthy or inadequate in his vision of life. So, here Livingstone clearly brings out a similarity between history and literature. Just as in history, we can bring out the difference between greatness and goodness. For example, he quotes here the names of Napoleon, Bismarck, Hitler, Lenin, the great personalities, political personalities. When we go through their life, their biographies, we get to know that though they were great leaders, but how is it possible to ignore that they even adopted evil means in their lives? And whatever evil they did, it lives even after their death. It is present even today in the books. And similarly, in literature, when we are going through a particular work of literature, we should not be blinded by the genius of that writer. We should not ignore what is inadequate and what is unworthy in that work of literature as far as the vision of life is concerned of that writer. Just because a particular writer is considered to be a great writer or a genius, we cannot be blindfolded while reading his works of literature and believe that whatever he has presented in his work is excellent and first rate. So, in literature, also, we need to draw a line of demarcation between what is good and what is great. For our purpose, which is to know the best in human nature, we must turn to the writers that show it. So, if we want to know what is best in human nature, we should pick up those writers who actually paint human nature in their works of literature. Fortunately, and it can hardly be accident, the greatest writers have also the noblest vision. He says that fortunately enough, if we pick up great writers, then undoubtedly these writers have the noblest vision of life. So we won't make a mistake in picking up the works of great writers, because Livingstone believes that great writers have noblest vision about life. So in this particular unit 4, he has talked about 3 streams: religion, history and literature. How we can know what is excellent through religion, history and literature. So that's all for the explanation of unit 4. Thank you.